Praise to you, O Christ, King of eternal glory. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. There was a man named Lazarus who lived in the village of Bethany with the two sisters, Mary and Martha, and he was ill. It was the same Mary, the sister of the sick man Lazarus, who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. The sisters sent this message to Jesus: "Lord, the man you love is ill." On receiving the message, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death, but in God's glory, and through it the Son of God will be glorified." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed where he was for 2 more days before saying to his disciples, "Let us go to Judea." The disciples said, "Rabbi, it is not long since the Jews wanted to stone you. Are you going back again?" Jesus replied, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? A man can walk in the daytime without stumbling, because he has the light of this world to see by. But if he walks at night, he stumbles, because there is no light to guide him." He said that, and then added, "Our friend Lazarus is resting. I am going to wake him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he is able to rest, he is sure to get better." The phrase Jesus used referred to the death of Lazarus, but they thought that by rest he meant sleep. So Jesus put it plainly: "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake I am glad I was not there, because now you will believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, known as the twin, said to the other disciples, "Let us go too and die with him." On arriving, Jesus found that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days already. Bethany is only about 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to sympathize with them over their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus had come, she went to meet him. Mary remained sitting in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, whatever you ask of God, he will grant you." "Your brother," said Jesus to her, "will rise again." Martha said, "I know he will rise again at the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. If anyone believes in me, even though he dies, he will live. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she said, "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who has come into this world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in a low voice, "The Master is here and wants to see you." Hearing this, Mary got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village. He was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the disciples who were in the house sympathizing with Mary saw her get up so quickly and go out, they followed her, thinking that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Mary went to Jesus, and as soon as she saw him, she threw herself at his feet, saying, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." At the sight of her tears and those of the Jews who followed her, Jesus said in great distress, with a sigh that came straight from the heart, "Where have you put him?" They said, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. And the Jews said, "See how much he loved him." But there were some who remarked, "He opened the eyes of the blind man. Could he not have prevented this man's death?" Still sighing, Jesus reached the tomb. It was a cave with a stone to close the opening. Jesus said, "Take the stone away." Martha said to him, "Lord, by now he will smell. This is the 4th day." Jesus replied, "Have I not told you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing my prayer. I knew indeed that you would always hear me, but I speak for the sake of all those who stand round me, so that they may believe it was you who sent me." When he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, here, come out." The dead man came out, his feet and hands bound with bands of stuff and a cloth round his face. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him, let him go free." Many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what he did believed in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Some time ago, my young sister, who lives down south, was coming up to visit my mum, and I was picking her up from the airport to take her down to my mum. And we were driving down the M8 and just past the junction for the Erskine Bridge, before the junction for Bishopton. When you come down off that hill and it turns and you're driving along by the side of the Clyde, my sister said, "This view never fails to take my breath away." And I was thinking, it's because she can see Port Glasgow. You know, she's right. I mean, that scenery is just magnificent. But here's the thing. I hardly notice it. It doesn't take my breath away. I drive down that road frequently and hardly even see it. And the Gospels are a wee bit like that, especially Gospels that we're really familiar with. Today's Gospel, you could probably tell that story without even looking at the Scriptures. We know what happened to Lazarus. It's really familiar. It's a popular story. You know, and it's just so clear to us. And the thing is it reasonable to say that this encounter is all about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead? Does that sound about right? That's not the point of the gospel. It's not about Lazarus. It's about Jesus. In John's gospel, he's very careful. You know, we could talk here about the miracle of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. But in John's gospel, he never, ever, ever uses the word miracle. For John, they're only signs. The very first sign was the turning of the water into the wine way back at the wedding feast in Cana. We saw a sign last week where he healed the blind man. Today we have another sign. And the signs are there to do two things. And if you listen really careful to the gospel today, you will see these things coming out. The signs are first of all there to reveal who Jesus really is. This isn't a miracle worker. This isn't someone with just some kind of powers. This is someone who is the very power over nature itself. This is the Son of God. That's what we're dealing with here. Not just a good man who can do amazing things, but this is the Son of God. So that's the first thing that the sign is to inspire in us, to see Jesus for who he really is. And the second thing that the sign is meant to do is inspire belief in the Son of God. That when we see these signs, when we see the work of Jesus, we are called to believe in him. And we see that all through the gospel today as well. If you believe in him, you will not die. You will live, even if you die. At the end of the gospel, the Jews who had come to sympathize with Martha and Mary saw what Jesus did and believed. That's the whole point of the gospel today, is to help us to see who Jesus really is. He is the Son of God. And to help us to grow in our belief, to be his followers, to understand who he is. And we see this dialogue between Martha and Mary. And the two women handle their disappointment completely differently. You know, Martha runs to Jesus, and you can almost feel the anger in her. She does not wait till Jesus comes. She runs out in the road, and she meets Jesus. And she says, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." You get her anger. I'm sure when some of you have lost someone very close, that prayer is about, God, why did you let this happen? You can understand where Martha is coming to. Mary handles it completely different. She stays in the house. You get the impression that Mary is overcome by her grief. You know, that her friends who came to sympathize with her, when she got up and went away, they thought she was going to the tomb to weep. So presumably she was sitting at home weeping. You know, she's much more kind of passive about this. She's just grief-stricken. And she only comes to Jesus when Jesus calls for her. But her reaction is the same. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Martha kind of extends it a wee bit. She obviously catches herself on, and she says to Jesus, "But I know even now, whatever you ask of God, he will grant." And then Jesus comes back to her, and he says, "Do you believe in the resurrection?" And she says, "Yeah, I believe in the resurrection. But you know, at the moment, that's not a great comfort to me. I believe in the resurrection at the end of time. I believe in that resurrection," Martha says. But you can hear her grief. She doesn't want a resurrection at the end of time. She wants her brother back. She loves her brother. And she's disappointed in Jesus. They sent a message to Jesus saying, "The man you love is ill." And they expect Jesus to drop everything, to come to them, and to be with them at this time. But Jesus doesn't do that. He continues his work. He continues his preaching. He doesn't drop everything right away. And yet we get a hint of how dangerous it is for Jesus to go back, because the disciples, when he does get round to saying, "I'm going back," the disciples say, "You don't want to go back there because the reason we left there is they were wanting to stone you to death." And Jesus wants to go back there. And this dialogue with Martha, "Do you believe in the resurrection?" "Yes, I believe in the resurrection at the end of time." But Jesus says to her, "I am the resurrection and the life." Now, kind of when in English you say that sentence, it's "I am the resurrection and the life." But that's not what's happening here. The word "I am" is first heard in the scriptures when Moses encounters God. And they have a dialogue together. And God is telling Moses what he wants him to do. And he's to go back to the people and lead the people. And Moses is saying, well, they might not accept me as the leader. I mean, what right have I to be the leader? And then Moses said, what will I tell them your name is? And God says, I am. The full meaning of the word in English would be, I am who I am. You can't define me. I am who I am. And here is Jesus using the same language. I am. Jesus is identifying himself as the Son of God. I am the resurrection and the life. I am God's power over death. You know, we hear in that gospel that really touching part that it stands out really. Jesus wept. And I think, yes, he wept at the death of his friend Lazarus. It's natural to do that. But I think his weeping was much deeper than that. Jesus was weeping because death exists at all. Death is not brought about by God. God never intended for there to be death. Death is brought about by the great tempter when he tempts Adam and Eve and they succumb. And as a consequence, death is introduced into nature. And Jesus is weeping because of that. Jesus doesn't want death any more than you or I want death. But he also reveals himself as the God who has power even over death. That he has the power to reverse the consequences of our sins. This reflection on death, and we see the comfort that Martha and Mary receive from their companions, just fits in nicely with the final part of our series over these past 5 weeks of reflecting that the parish council has been broken into sections to look at the various aspects of parish life, those aspects that help us to grow as joyful disciples of Jesus Christ and help us to proclaim his love in the world. And today I'm going to invite Andy up, who's going to talk to us about the last group. Big welcome for Andy to come up. Andy, welcome this morning. Introduce yourself to those who might not know you and introduce your team to us.
For those who do not know me, and I'm surprised if you don't, my name's Andy Mulvane and I'm part of the Pastoral Council. I'm also part of the Alpha coordinating team and I am asked to lead this new group within the parish.
And who is the group?
The group is called the Befriending Group, and we hope to befriend people who are experiencing the loss.
Andy, before you do that, please introduce your group.
Sorry,
Who's in your group?
I'm jumping this gun again. The members of this group are Kay McGee.
Do you want to stand up, Kay, so that we all can see you?
Lynn Meikle.
Lynn.
And Liz McDonald. No, sorry, Liz isn't here this morning.
Liz was too embarrassed in case you had to stand up. Thanks, guys. Okay, Andy, and so what does your group do?
Our group, as I jumped the gun and said, we plan to be a support group for people who are experiencing loss of a loved one. We hope to do this by visiting the person or the family to have an old tradition of the rosary at the time of a death as a support through them, getting to know the family and the bereaved people, to befriend them, to be someone to talk to them and be someone there for them at the time of need. When someone dies, the family and the friend are all round, comforting and consoling them. But the day after the funeral, they've all flown away and the person is left on their own. We hope that is where we can step in, become friends for them, inviting out for tea, coffee and things, and just being a friend, a listening ear and a support.
sounds good, Andy. So you're really talking about what Martha and Mary experienced there, the comfort of their loved ones and family, but also the comfort of the wider community. And we want to be a parish that comforts you in your need, comforts you when you have loss like that, any kind of loss indeed. So I think it's fair to say if you're listening to Andy and thinking, do you know what, I would like to be part of that group, then please talk to Andy or Kay or Lynn at the end of Mass. Just have a chat with them. If you feel that you would need that kind of support in your life at this time, then again, please talk to them and they'll provide that. Andy, thanks for that. I've been finishing each week by asking the person that comes up to talk why you personally are involved in this.
Right, I'm a retired psychiatric nurse, and I was the manager of a care of the elderly ward for people experiencing dementia. I was privileged on numerous occasions to sit by the bed of a dying person until their family arrived. That was an unforgettable experience of being with someone as they passed on. On a more personal note, 10 years ago, my mother died at 93, very suddenly. Even though she was 93, her death was sudden. After the death, Anne-Marie and I went up to the parish priest to arrange the funeral, as one does. The priest told us that my mother stayed in a sheltered housing complex, and the parish priest told us that my mother had the rosary every Tuesday night in the complex, and it would be nice if we went along. What an experience that was. We were greeted by about 20 people who gathered with my mother every Tuesday to pray the rosary. We were invited to join them, and it was just beautiful saying the rosary for the repose of the soul of my mother. On a cheerier side, my mother loved parodies. She knew hundreds of parodies. For every popular song, she knew a different version. After the rosary, these people asked me to sing some of the parodies. 24 hours after my mother's death, I was sitting singing silly songs in front of pensioners. But it was a great experience, unforgettable. Even to today, it's very close to my heart, the love and affection a parish showed towards me as a grieving person. And I hope we can do that to other people.
Andy, thanks a lot. Thank you. You know, it occurs to me there's a theme going through all the speakers. I've asked each week, for the last 5 weeks, each person, why do you do this personally? Some of it, they've all expressed it in different ways, but I think we can see in all of them there's the same pattern. They love God and they want to serve God. And they want to give something back in life. But in doing so, they receive so much more. The problem for Martha and Mary, and probably for most of us, was that their expectation of Jesus was flawed. They loved Jesus. They trusted Jesus. And so they wanted Jesus to be there when their brother was sick, because they believed that their prayer would only be answered if Jesus was there when he was sick. Jesus, on the other hand, knew that their prayer could be answered even after death. And we experience that in our life. How often have you prayed to God and you are met with silence? Or you've asked God for something particular and it doesn't happen? And you're left, like Martha and Mary, thinking, if you had been here, God, things would be different. But what today's gospel teaches us, that in fact, God always answers our prayer. Always. He won't necessarily answer it at the immediate moment you want it fixed. Or he might not answer your prayer by fixing it the way that you want it fixed. But he will always answer your prayer. And God's timeline extends even beyond the tragedy of death. There's a beautiful part of that gospel where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. He says, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus, we're told, comes out. And we're given this description about he's all bound up with bandages and cloths and stuff like that. He's restricted. He's in his death gear. And Jesus says, unbind him. Let him go free. Jesus is not only giving life, he is giving freedom. And our prayer as we approach this Holy Week is that God will raise us up from all those aspects in our life that are not life-giving. Those aspects of our life where we are dead. And we pray that God will raise us up and unbind us so that we are free to worship him, to serve him, and to love him.